Hello, good evening and a very warm welcome to the Angewandte Innovation Laboratory. I'm Bernhard Kernegger and I'm very happy to be allowed to welcome you in the name of the Angewandte. As Rector Bast is part of the panel, I can do this welcome. As I see, there are a lot of colleagues from our quality management network here. There are lots of new faces I suspect might be future students of our new study program, Crossdisciplinary Strategies. Perhaps you can give a sign if you are here in the context of cross-disciplinary strategies. Thank you so much. And I see there are also people from other contexts, which is also great to see, because obviously the topic of tonight is interesting, and it's more interesting than we have chairs to offer, for which I'm sorry. Before I hand over to Oliver Vettori, who will introduce the podium, I will just want to introduce Oliver. Oliver Vettori works at the Business University Vienna as a Dean for Accreditation and Quality Enhancement and Academic Affairs and a lot of things. He is one of the leading European experts for quality enhancement, which in a way nicely bridges our today network meeting with the topic of tonight, which is a topic that Angewandte is specially targeting at, also with the establishment of the new study program I mentioned, and I'm sure it will appear tonight in different contexts. So I wish you an interesting 1.5 hours and a good discussion.
I'm going to stand up just for 2 minutes and then I'm sitting down so I'm not ominously towering over the panel here. Very welcome. It's great to have so many people here. Taking a look at the slides, I realized I was probably picked to moderate tonight's panel because my shirt corresponds to the color up there, also of the folder. I don't want to talk anything about me, but I'm going to introduce very briefly the panelists. Some of you might not be able to see them back there, but you will hopefully be able to hear them. So I'm starting to my far right, Ingeborg Reichel, who is a professor at the Angewandte at the University of Applied Arts Vienna, and also the head of the Department for Cross-Disciplinary Strategies, and in charge of the study program that is starting this October with this very focus. To her left, we have Eve Lewis, director of Sparks. Sparks is a non-profit organization. The acronym stands for Student Partnerships in Quality Scotland, and it's an organization, I think, that one of the leading institutions in Europe that focusing on fostering student engagement, student partnerships in higher education. To my right here is Wolfgang Bill Price. Wolfgang has so many careers that it's going to fill the evening talking just about that. He's been a soldier, he's been a diplomat, but today he's here as the speaker of the Council for a Progressive Economy. I'm coming back to that a bit later. To my left, Hans Pecher, professor at the University of Klagenfurt at the Faculty of Interdisciplinary Studies and from the Department of Science Communication and Higher Education Research, one of Austria's most renowned higher education researchers. And last but not least, the host of tonight, Rector Gerrit Bast, the longest serving rector in Austrian higher education at the moment, and director of the University of Applied Arts. Now, the interesting thing about this panel, as you might have realized, it brings together a lot of different perspectives. Higher education management, higher education research, the academic perspective, if I may, so the student perspective. And Bill is representing also the perspective of someone who comes from outside the university and says what the university should actually focus on. So there's a lot of different perspectives, and all my colleagues in quality assurance are very much used to juggling with those different stakeholder interests and different stakeholder perspectives, and we're going to juggle them tonight for this panel discussion. Now, I've introduced the panel. There's another important actor, and that's actually you, all of you that you're sitting here. No panel discussion works without an audience. It's rather boring, but not because there isn't an audience, but because there's no one else to ask the questions. You will have plenty of opportunity to ask your questions in about the second half of the panel discussion, but we wanted the discussion to be as interactive as possible and to give you the opportunity to actually steer tonight's panel discussion in various directions. So those of you who are sitting, you might have found on your seats two colored sheets of paper. Could you take a look? Maybe you're sitting on them? All right. If you found them, one of them should be, please keep both of them. One of them should be yellow, one of them should be orange. You're going to need them a couple of times tonight, but just to make sure the system works, it's the cheapest voting system that is imaginable. And I think the colors were picked because they're not corresponding to any of the political parties running right now. Yes? Orange was running once, but yeah, let me just pose a test question. For those of you who have already seen the exhibition upstairs, and seen doesn't mean you've seen them on the way in, that there is an exhibition, but you took the time to actually visit it, I will ask you to raise the orange card in a minute. For those of you who have not seen it yet, but plan to see it before it closes at the end of September, please raise the yellow card. And for those of you who are not that much into this exhibition upstairs, just keep your hands on the seat. All right? So orange for I've seen it, yellow for I want to see it, none of them if you're not interested that much in the exhibition. Please raise your cards now. All right. A lot of interest, a future interest. Maybe you have to prolong the opening. We see that. So that's basically the way it's going to work. All the questions are going to be two-dimensional in a way, or three-dimensional, that you just raise the color that is going to correspond to each of them. I'm going to sit down again, because now it's all about the panel. And this time we're not starting with the ladies, we're starting with Rector Bass. Each of the panelists has prepared a short statement focusing on tonight's topic. And I wish us all a pleasant evening, and I would like you to start with.
Thank you very much. Welcome this evening. It's really great to see that so many people are interested in the future. This is great because a lot of people say and write that this is a time of no future, that we have a generation of no future and no hope. And you are proving the opposite. There is a future. There is a possible way to design the future. And one of my favorite thinkers, a thinker and artist, media artist, Peter Weibel, once said, the future is easy to predict because and if you are part of designing it. And just coming here to this discussion about the future of labor and the future of education, which is actually connected, is proving for me that a lot of people are interested not only in thinking about the future, hearing about the future, but also taking part in designing the future. So let's start. As some of you might know me, and so they are not surprised that I again try to provoke you in some way, which doesn't mean that I don't mean what I say, but it's a way to make people thinking by driving to the edge. So a lot of you have seen the exhibition upstairs about the future of work, and you might have got an idea what will be, what could be the future of work. First of all, that a lot of jobs, some people say up to 50% of the now existing jobs won't exist anymore in 20 years' time. There are a lot of studies from Europe, from the UK, from the US, who are proving that this is a figure. They might quarrel if it's 40% or 45 or 50%. It's a lot. And the amazing thing is that all time when such a study is published, the labor unions, hand in hand with the Chamber of Industrialists, are getting to the press and say, no, that's rubbish, it won't be so bad, we'll make it. We did made it all the time in the past industrial revolutions, and we had to overcome these industrial revolutions, and at every time there were not only new kind of jobs, but even more kind of jobs. But this time, and it's not only me who is saying this time there are some quite different approaches and aspects. We never had, and you can see it and feel it if you look back in your inner eye, what happened in the past 10 years in terms of technology, in terms of how life, how work, how democracy changed. We never had a speed like this, like we are facing in our times. And we never had technologies, and maybe Bill will talk a little bit more about what is this technology like. We never had a technology which has a potential of so deep and vast disruption. Our whole life will change. How we work will totally change. What we work will totally change. Our leisure time, how we live together, how we communicate, how we understand a community of a government, of a state, democracy. It is totally changing. And just simple things. 3 months ago, I flew from the Vienna airport. And as usually, you have to go to a box if you didn't get at home the check-in. You go to the box and then go to the counter and pass over your luggage. And now, at that time, there were 2 or 3 stations with automatic check-in and passing your luggage. Now, all the Austrian Airlines counters are equipped, totally equipped with automatic passing over the luggage. You still have sitting there some ladies doing what they did 3 months ago, but in 3 months, or at least in half a year, there won't be only 2 or 3 people who will advise the people for another half a year how to do it themselves. You just have to go to a supermarket. You see what is happening, what is beginning. Not to talk about the bank system. A few months ago, I was at the bank, which is a totally different bank, and there only were no people, only machines, boxes, machines, where you could do everything. And there was an old lady. 1 minute. Okay. There was an old lady, totally helpless, and she said, "Oh, I need a person. Where is a person? I need some help." So this is our future, and this future won't only be in terms of service in manufacturing. It will go up to legal professions, medical professions, financial. So if all this is changing, it is obvious that education will have to change dramatically. And I just will read some ideas, predictions, what will be education in 30 years' time. 75% of all people participate in education on tertiary level. Actually now in Austria we have 17%. But only a small number of students are studying in highly specialized courses like we have them now, from German language to law. The majority of students will study in interdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary, transdisciplinary courses. The redefinition of work, which is necessary if we don't want to get rid of work, which would be a catastrophe, despite the discussion of the unconditional income. The redefinition of work will involve lifelong participation in education, and arts and humanities are integral parts of education at all levels and in all courses. And in schools before university level, apart from our classical cultural techniques like reading, writing and arithmetics, there is no teaching limited to individual subjects. Creative competence becomes the new culture technology, which means dealing with ambiguity and uncertainty, imagination, association, intuition, abstraction, critical thinking, creating new content. This is the main task of education in the future, and this won't last 30 years. And this is where the art schools, and I said it already this morning, get into this new kind of education system. It's the arts and dealing with the arts, confronting oneself with the arts, how and where you learn these new cultural competencies. Later, more.
All right. Thank you very much, Rector Bast. Handing over to Hans Pecher, who has a maybe a different view, but very likely also coming to similar conclusions.
Well, I will continue with Gerald's thought about the technological change and what the impact on high education, mainly higher education, is, but from a different perspective. I will focus on the impact of the digital revolution on the forms of learning, mainly in form of a new generation of online learning. As you see from my statement, I do think that this will have a huge impact. If one some of you might have been confronted with this media hype about the massive open online courses some years ago. I don't think that the future of higher education will be the MOOCs, as they are called, as we know it. But to do justice to the MOOCs, one can, if you study what has happened here in the last 5 or 6 years, one can see on the one hand a lot of problems with this type of online education, but one can also see huge potential. The main reason why I think that this time, as Gerald said, why should it be different this time? One can ask the same question with respect to the impact of technology on learning, because there were so many predictions over the last decades which all proved wrong, huge expectations which were disappointed. Now, in some way the MOOCs hype has gone a similar way, but still I think that the internet and has reached a complexity and a potential that allows a type of learning that really has a huge potential in many aspects, mainly but not only in the form of factual learning. Those learning things that Gerald thinks will be less important. I'm not so sure about that. I still think that this will be important, that the MINT disciplines will still be quite important, and as you all know, they're extremely hard to learn, and there is a huge potential with this new open online, this new online education to make it easier to grasp very difficult subjects. The main reason for that is that what the experts call learning analytics, that you get immediate feedback if you make mistakes, if you don't understand something, you get immediate feedback, and at the same time those who construct these courses learn from how students learn and improve the courses. So this is the technological potential. At the same time, there is this has the potential of huge productivity gains. We all know that higher education everywhere in the world, everywhere in the OECD countries, is faced with huge financial problems. In most countries, this has resulted in a steady decline of expenses per student, with consequences for the quality of higher education. In some countries, mainly in North America, this has the result they were able to keep the expenses per students, but on the cost of exploding tuition fees. So this is very problematic. So this has productivity gains with the potential of doing more for less. Now, as I have in my statement, I have a positive and a worst case scenario. The positive scenario is that these productivity gains will actually be used to enhance the learning potential for students and the working conditions of academics. However, there are huge dangers. It could, the consequences could also be that a kind of two-class universities where only some students, either the more talented or the richer students, have the potential, have the opportunity of universities as we know it, and other students will only get a cheap kind of online education. It might have huge consequences for the academic profession, with the possibility of a kind of winner-take-all economy, that you have some megastars, like we have it in professional sports or in the popular media, in the popular pop arts. Yeah, you have some superstars, and the rest gets very little, next to nothing. Yeah, this is. So these are the dangers, and again, more in my next statement.
All right, thank you very much. I think we're going a bit back into the issue of inequality a bit later, but first it's up to Bill and his view of the future.
Thank you. First, I must say something about the introduction about myself. That I'm not the youngest person on the panel as a parent. And I did have some experience in a variety of fields. But I must say, It is a very nice thing for a person my age to sit in this room and see so many young people willing to listen to me. So I want to thank you. And I hope I have a message for you. I would like to start by this old lady that you mentioned that you saw at the airport. I have an old lady story. There is the story of an elderly lady. I don't know if she was old, and she was in a home. It's one of these homes for elderly care where people after 60 can live in nice surroundings, but their basic needs are met by others. The owner of this establishment decided to hire a robot and test a robot to see how the robot could augment the people who are daily providing these services. Well, the robot did very well. After some time, the proprietor went around and asked the individual patients what they thought about the service of the robot, and particularly in comparison to the human service. And the old lady said she really liked this robot. It's very attentive. It's available 24 hours a day. It doesn't sleep. It responds quickly to all her needs. But she said, when I die, will there be a human by me? And you understand that we live in an era where we will gain immense benefits from these new technologies. We should really welcome them. But the question remains, what is there in it for us at the end? Are we living a better life as a result of that? Are we dying with the feeling that we've lived a good life? That would be difficult. The artificial intelligence, as it is embedded in different forms, will surround us. Sometimes it may look humanoid, but most of the time it may take other forms. One form is, of course, the smartphone and Siri, but Siri is just the beginning of what we will have to contend with. What will be extremely trying for us will be how we raise children in the era of artificial intelligence. Imagine every child starts learning 1, 2, 3. Robots simply keep learning all of the time. How can a child keep up with the memory capacity and the infinite recall that is embedded in these things that will be smart all around us? How do we deal with a child by the time it's 3 that has seen the mother use smartphones, and a child at 3 or 4 uses a smartphone and checks on the mother how smart the mother is? And that will happen. The mother says, this isn't good for you, but Siri says something else. We will have to contend with a society in which each of us are going to be ambivalent. We're going to listen to the elders, like me, and then we're going to go ahead and get on to our smartphones, or if they look like humanoids, we may. How many of you have seen Erica? Nobody has seen Erica in this room. One person has seen Erica. Can you see? The interesting thing, Gerald, is you said, what will life be like, or how would we live in the future? What we don't understand really is the future is here. The future, we're living the future. We don't recognize we're living the future. We think it's there, but it's really here. In 1964, in Washington, D.C., a group of 25 people met and produced a paper a year later called The Triple Revolution. How many of you have heard of the Triple Revolution? How many have you heard of Linus Pauling? 2 people. Linus Pauling is one of the few who won 2 Nobel Prizes. Well, Linus Pauling, with his 2 Nobel Prizes, convened in 1964 a group of 25 eminent Americans, really eminent Americans, and they sat around and they talked about the future. And they wrote a paper called The Triple Revolution. It's easily available on the internet. All of us should read it because it talks about cybernation and how they saw the impact of cybernation in the future. Now we're living in this future 50 years later, and we still didn't recognize and think the future is still in the future. We're living in the future now. You should be familiar with Future Shock if you haven't read Future Shock. I might say, in ending, that I head the Council for a Progressive Society. In our council, I managed to get also 25 people together. We prepared on the 50th anniversary of the famous Triple Revolution a paper which you may find outside, and we asked, are we prepared? We're not asking what does the future look like. We know already enough about the future. The question is, how are we preparing for the future? What are we doing for the future? And I hope that we can perhaps get some insight in how do we start the preparation process.
Thank you so much, Bill. Now, Eve, yes, you already have your microphone. Now, you're going to take a different perspective. And your statement is also very much focused on a different issue. Do you want to lead us there?
Yeah. So when I was looking at trying to prepare for today, I knew some of them would be talking about technology. I've not ignored it completely, but I thought I would have a think about the challenges of the world and how higher education might be looking towards playing a role in addressing those. When I started to look at some of those challenges, when we're looking at issues such as global warming, climate change, radicalization, globalization, huge issues that we're facing. I tried to look at something that would tie those things together. And so for me, when I look at the challenges we face, one of the key issues I think we need to start to address is equality. Equalities within our own communities and where we work and study, but also more global issues of inequality, and that some of those challenges lie at the heart of us starting to deal with that. I think there's a growing realization of that higher education might play in some of these aspects. So in terms of looking at issues to do with social cohesion, we've certainly started to see policymakers start to address that in terms of there's been a treaty coming from the Council of Ministers within a European context about the role higher education can play in social cohesion, and also looking at things like the UN sustainability goals, where we're looking again at issues of climate change really being based in how we deal with inequality. So as higher education institutions and as we start to address inequalities, we need to look at how we can do that. And it's a very big and complex issue. So I think we're looking at issues relating to widening access and who can access education and how fair and equitable that is. We're also looking at the curricula and what is taught in terms of things like climate change. So if we're teaching climate change to a whole load of environmental scientists, are we also covering issues such as inequality within that, or treating it purely as a scientific matter? We're looking at issues related to diversification of the curriculum. So certainly in terms of aspects where people are looking at the curriculum and saying it comes from a purely Eurocentric point of view, so looking at how white your curriculum is, how accessible it is in terms of gender, how we teach things from one perspective and how we might look to facing the future by widening that perspective. For me though, it's also around when we're talking around how we prepare ourselves for the world ahead. We've talked about how we prepare people with skills and attributes and the world of work. But if we're looking at actually preparing ourselves for a future, for me it's important that we start to look at values and behaviours, and not just preparing people for a world of work, but preparing people for the societies in which they live, where they live as responsible citizens, and not just people contributing economically to their societies, but contributing socially. One of the reasons why, therefore, I've picked this as an issue that I would like us to focus on is that for me, my work is around how we develop and support students to have a voice in shaping the world that they live in and the places that they study. And certainly when I look at some of the work and things that matter to students, that this is the sort of thing that comes through. So students that we work with have been involved in huge projects where they're looking at social cohesion and the role that they can play as citizens. They're also looking at aspects to do with diversification of the curriculum and projects where they are actively shaping curriculum in a way that is ahead of the game in terms of other people that they're working with within their academic environments. So instead of waiting for the world to catch up with their view, then students are coming through and changing that to make sure that they're starting to shape an environment that works for them. And clearly for that to be effective and for our university environments to really address those issues of equality, we need to look at who comes, who accesses education, and that actually the more diverse our communities are, the more our students will learn from each other as well as from their academics around what it means to be a responsible citizen and how to face the world ahead of them.
All right, thank you so much, Eve. Now, last but not least, Ingeborg, and since your study program is going to tackle at least a few of the issues, yeah, and leading us in the future, do you want to talk a bit about your statement?
Yeah, we hope that the study program Crossdisciplinary Strategies, which is a brainchild of Gerald Bast and a couple of other colleagues at the Angewandte, will offer a curriculum that will put students into a position to cope with the future labour market, not in getting specialized or say education in a very, very special field, but education on a broad scale to be able to get the big picture. And for me it is very, very fascinating to be part of that development, and because when I studied late in the 90s, there was something coming up. It was called Internet or World Wide Web, and I was studying, or I was trained in Hamburg and in London, and I was so frustrated that in the field of humanities, where I studied, this was not a topic at all. We felt in the 90s that there was a world outside, but this was not part of our curriculum, and our professors were long retired. They were not, like for them it was all about their research, although I have to say their research was very interdisciplinary already, but they did not had a look at current developments in technology, like what Gerald Bast just tried to focus on. And and when we see what happened in the last 25 years in education, in the education sector, there will be an enormous changes, I would say, in the next 2, 5 or 10 years, and there will be more and more algorithms that will be part of the curriculum, that will design and will be part of the learning process. So, and what is interesting for our curriculum, that we will educate people who will be able to cope with that, to cope with a situation that you will have, we could call it intelligence machines, but there will be an algorithmic process in the background, whatever we do, whatever kind of decisions we make, there will be an intelligent machine that will be part in that process. And it's very, very important that already on the bachelor level, that we train people who have a broad awareness, who want to get the big picture and see what kind of decision-making processes will be out there and will be important in NGOs or in other institutions. So the idea is that we look at global challenges like climate change or artificial life or injustice. There are many out there, but we will also reflect on the way that we teach younger students today to cope with the future problematic situations we will face, and there will be a great number of it. And what Bill Price said in another conference is that, and which was so impressing for me, that we will educate people in our education system, but it will be quite likely that there will be not enough labor, there will be not enough jobs for all people educated at the universities, because our education system during the 20th century was designed to produce labor forces for the industry. But what will happen if the industry doesn't need us or doesn't need these people anymore? We probably can't be all artists. That is not the solution, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, I didn't want to interrupt you. Was just, yeah, you wanted to add something right on?
I wanted to add to that comment. For about 200 years, with the advent of the Industrial Revolution, the technologies which started as tools, shovels and pliers, and became more sophisticated, required humans who also had to become more sophisticated. And so as technology grew, the requirements for human talent grew, and so universities became actually the training ground for much of the industry that we have today. Industry benefited. Normally, when you look for a job, there are already 20 applicants for that job, and the employer has a chance to pick one, and he picks the one that best suits his needs. And so industry for 200 years has been using much of the human talent to develop an economy which has benefited all of us. But we're entering an era when industry will need less of that human talent. That should not scare us. What we need is to find new ways of using the human talent. And what I propose is that for the next 100 years, the human talent that would have gone to industry now is used in the Gesellschaft to create a better society. What is wrong with using the craft, the mental abilities for another venture, a 100-year venture to produce an improved society? In Vienna's case, when we created the Ringstraße, as I recall, that was a visionary project. It saw into the future a new way that a city can operate. Why can't we look into the city of 2100 and create a new city, a city that suits the era of artificial intelligence, but that also suits the new ways that we have to live? So we're not running out of work. There's lots of work to be done. And we have a role for education. But the education we need into the future is the education that builds a Gesellschaft. It's an education which isn't directed to simply making the technology that industry requires work, but to a new kind of technology, which is what we require to build a Gesellschaft. I think there will be much work to be done, but it will be not in the sense of a job. Now, how we finance that, we can discuss, and you know there are ways that we have to discuss that, how we allocate the resources so to make it possible. But we're not running out of work. It's simply a matter of where that work is devoted to.
All right. Thank you very much, Bill. Thank you, all the panelists. It's actually a very tough job today, cutting you all short, because it's a lot of fascinating statements, a lot of direction where we could take that. Now, being very conscious of time, we could take that into many directions, I would narrow it down to two issues that all of you raised. One of them was about the purpose of higher education, the way of what are the challenges that we need to prepare students for. Yeah, if it's societal issues, if it's more in the areas of challenges that we need to tackle, of technological change. So this is one direction, one of the issues. It's even leading us to the function of higher education institutions in a way, but for what are we actually educating people? And the other one is, how are we doing that? How are we approaching that? Now I'm actually asking the audience what you want to go into first, being aware of time. Please raise the orange slide if you want to focus on the purpose, on the what shall we study, what are the competences and skills that the future is going to need. And the other question, raise the yellow chart if you're more interested in how are we actually going to do that and how are institutions going to cope with that. Just give me a sign. Now that looks like a tie. Very much like a tie. Okay, I have a lot of experience with the network, they know that. So then I would suggest we tackle both issues, if you agree. Yeah, it looks very much like a compromise. But I would ask the panel to be really very focused and brief so we can go into both directions. And I'm also trying to be a bit more direct with the questions. Now, starting again with Gerald Bast, what you also raised the question that we don't actually know. Yeah, Bill was kind of contradicting that, but we don't actually know where it will lead us. So the question is, how are we going to identify the needs that education is going to fulfill?
I just want first answer to 2 points we heard about. You said it, Hans, the needs of MINT, we call it in German language, or STEM in English. And this always reminds me on what happened long time ago when all the schools from almost primary schools began to introduce teaching how a computer is working. Electronic data processing was introduced in all the school curricula and also in lots of university curricula. And now we have a similar situation. We see that there is a century of digitization, and the answer of most of the politicians, if we read papers and look at televisions, yes, we have entered the digital century, and therefore to solve these problems and to meet the challenges, we need an education that a lot of people will need more students of informatics, we need more education in science and mathematics, and we need more people who can talk and deal with these problems. And what happened 20, 25 years ago? This approach, introducing electronic data processing into school curricula, totally failed. The teachers who taught that in a short time were worse than the students. The students were better in using computers than the teachers. And the same, I will predict, will happen now in a twofold way. On the one hand, the students will be better. On the other hand, machine learning will overrule all our attempts. So this is one point, how we and what we should do. And the second thing, Bill, you talked about smart cities. And if you look in all bigger cities, we have smart city panels and groups, and in Vienna as well. And who is sitting in these panels? The representatives of telecom companies and electrical supply companies. And they think this is the smart cities. a city of telecommunication and electrification and computerization. Of course, this will happen, and this already happened, but this is not smart. Smart will a city be if we can provide the people with creative intelligence and with social intelligence. Then a city will become smart. A city which have a lot of telecommunication, a lot of computers, a lot of IT and artificial intelligence, but without creative intelligence and without social intelligence, this won't be a smart city, and this rather will be a city we don't want to live in.
All right. Thank you very much, Georg.
Yes, I agree with what you said there, John. That's what I intended to say.
All right. Thank you. Now, this was raising two issues that social intelligence is already giving me kind of a link to what Eve was proposing, focusing on that we need to be very much aware of injustice, inequality, about issues apart from the digitalization, apart from technological change. There is social change that's partly induced by technological change, but it's also happening for other reasons. So what are you proposing? What is it that we should prepare students for?
I suppose when I look at what we prepare students for, and some of the link is with digitalization or the internet or all that, is students already, or people, we all have so much more access to knowledge and to information and to debate. Like, so it's not just that the internet gives us the facts. Like, the internet is a place where we can think and we can explore things. So in some ways that we have to be careful that the internet as a tool, or the digital world as a tool, is a tool that people already use. They don't particularly need to be ready for it, and young people are sometimes a little bit flummoxed at the thought and the care that we give to thinking about the digital world and preparing for it, because they already use it. It's already part of natural life. And any child that's picking up this information and has access to it, my children that have access to a whole load of debate about global issues and things like that. So for me, education has to be a place where we can explore those issues and where we could start to think about how we apply that to make the world a better place. And I suppose one of the ways in which we failed to do that, an example, I heard a keynote speech somewhere else where they were talking about graduate attributes and what we need to teach our people for when they leave. We failed, didn't we, when we were looking at the banking sector. We've taught hundreds and hundreds of graduates how to do finances and how to do business and how to cooperate on a global level, but we failed to teach them any ethics that would help us avoid the situation that we were in. So for me, those ethics and how we contribute to a social society is fundamentally what education is around. And to really make that work, you need a really multicultural, multidisciplinary, really rich values system being brought into our education. So it's not so much about what we do, about who we bring in and who is part of the communities in which we work.
All right, thank you, Eve. Bill, now you were nodding several times to what the others were saying, but you were also stating in your first statement, the future is already here. So how...
This is what the lady also just...
Exactly. So how do we actually... So a question of the purpose of it all and the what we should learn is how to make people aware of that. So...
I think the challenge really that we face is the things around us are going to get smarter. Whatever artificial intelligence can't cope with today, it'll cope with tomorrow. And if we say that the robot doesn't have feelings, which I would argue about for a moment, but if it doesn't, it'll respond to feelings at some future time. We cannot discount the development of the artificial intelligence in the 21st century. The question isn't what the intelligence can do, it's really a question of what do we need to prepare ourselves so that we feel that we can live in a meaningful, purposeful life and still secure the benefits from all of the things that are intelligent. So we want to use that intelligence, but we want to retain our dignity. We want to retain the things that make us essentially human. Now, what is that makes us essentially human is what I would like us to discuss. It isn't trigonometry, it isn't statistics, it isn't history, and it isn't geography. All right. And it isn't almost anything that I learned as an engineer, and it certainly is not anything I learned in my courses in economics. We are living in an era of surplus, no longer in an era of scarcity. We need an entirely new kind of economics. The question that we have to deal with is what makes us distinctly human, and how do we retain what makes us distinctly human in a vital way. We cannot hold on to things that that these smart things are getting into. We're just not going to compete with them on their ground. But what is our ground? Where do we feel secure? And that, I think, now, Job, some of the things that you sort of said, interdisciplinary, I think are essential. But we've got to better define what that means. How, at the end, what is the student learning so that we are creating a future where people feel secure as humans in a world where things around us are all acting in an intelligent way.
Right, thank you. That's leading to you, Ingeborg, I know. And you could also maybe help me reach a compromise with the audience and going into the how question already. How is cross-disciplinary, interdisciplinary teaching going to help with that?
Yeah, because I think one of our major focus is educating people with a critical mindset or with critical thinking, and this is what Bill just said, following in that direction, because the question is, when you said we as humans, the problem is who will be we, who will be the ones who are in the process to be educated, to have a bigger picture, who will have a say, a word, a voice. And I guess it will not be 7 billion, all of us. It will be probably a selection, and we try to educate people who are critical or have a critical perspective, because there will be, our democracies will be based on critical decision-making processes, and we will have to, it's not a very nice word, but we have to have a kind of elite who will be able to take advantage, to be part of those processes. And if you look around the world, especially in Washington, what kind of gang is now taking over the White House, of course we have to have a critical stand towards things that are going on there, but also within the developments of technology and science, and of course there is no escape. There will be artificial intelligence, there will be genetic engineering and CRISPR around, but we still have to educate people who have the ability to take a stand, pro or con, or whatever the decision will look like in the future.
All right, thank you. Now, Hans-Peter, you were the only one so far raising the issue of technology also as part of the pedagogy and didactics that we're using. So also asking you about the how we're going to get there, and maybe adding another question, because with the example of the MOOCs, you were already showing us that it's very difficult today to assess if something is going to be a stable solution or a stable trend, or if it's just a fad that's going to fade in a short term. So what, from your perspective, what are the educational trends that are going to help us move there?
Well, let me start saying that nobody could disagree with what the other speaker said, that we have to focus on what is essentially human, and that we need critical thinking, that we need interdisciplinary and cross-disciplinary thinking. I come from a faculty of interdisciplinary studies, so I'm familiar with that. However, I always was convinced that good interdisciplinary research needs a solid disciplinary base, otherwise it's just talk. Yeah? You need that, and I don't think that we can, in an age of artificial intelligence, leave the factual learning just to the artificial intelligence and focus on critical thinking without any factual base. That I don't think. So I do think that whatever the future of work and how, this is really speculation, and I have no really good expert opinion on how fast this transformation will be. We are talking here about the next 10 years, the next 10 or 15 or 20 years. I'm not so sure that the transformation of the work as we know it will go that fast, that the education system will no longer be needed to provide students for the work life. I don't think this will be the case. This will eventually, there will be some shifts, I'm absolutely sure, but how fast this will be, we can have guesses. I still think that there will be an enormous need, not only in the STEM disciplines, in many other disciplines there's a lot of need of difficult learning, and in that respect, that was the purpose of my statement, in that respect artificial intelligence and the new generation of online education can be of big help to master that. This is, and if we do it in the right way, if we design education systems in the right way, it will also provide opportunities for all the things the other speakers demanded, yeah? Critical thinking and focusing on questions of what is really human.
All right, thank you. Now that was also an attempt, thank you all, there was also an attempt to do justice to the yellow and to the orange sheet. Now again taking a glimpse on my watch, I asked the panel before we started to prepare a predictive statement for the final round, and we're almost at the end of this debate, but I also promised all of you that there would be a round of questions from the audience. So being aware of time, it will be very difficult to do justice to both of these ideas at the same time, so maybe you could again give me an ink of what you think. Please raise the yellow sheets if you say it's now time for questions from the audience. Please raise the orange ones if you say, no, let's stay with the panel for a while and let's hear the predictive statements. That's going to help me decide. All right, this time it's very clear. So we stay with you and we stay with what you've prepared. And since Ingeborg, maybe you could start this time. What is your personal prediction for the next, we agreed on the next kind of 10 years in higher education? What are we going to see?
I think what we are going to see is, of course, cross-disciplinary education, because research and science is more and more interdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary, and this will also affect the BA, the MA, and the PhD level as well. So although our study program is, like part of that on the bachelor level, we will see that also on other levels, like master, PhD programs, and postdoc, and so on. Because, especially in the field where I'm from, research is already, to a vast extent, interdisciplinary.
All right. Now, let me just add one question to your statement. Not challenging, but just asking you. But with the big reward systems in research and academia, still very much discipline bound in many fields. Yeah. How is that going to happen? Because we need interdisciplinary teaching, we also need interdisciplinary research, but journals are still very much disciplinary in the majority. Reward systems are very much disciplinary in the majority. Is that going to hinder that trend?
No, but if they want to survive, they have to adapt, so they have to become interdisciplinary. That's, so otherwise they will be probably gone in 5 or 10 years.
All right, thank you. Hans-Peter, what is your prediction coming from an interdisciplinary faculty?
Well, I hope that that there will be more, that the move into interdisciplinary research will continue. Actually, it is already now in all the calls for research projects. You have already the request to do some interdisciplinary research. So it is not, there is a lot of awareness of interdisciplinary. I don't think that it will, if we talk about the next 10 years, I don't see at all that the disciplinary base of research will go away. This is not the case. It will be probably in 10 years that the journals, there will be probably still mainly disciplinary based journals. I want to say one sentence about a different issue which I'm quite concerned and where I did a lot of research recently. This is about the working conditions of academics, and there I'm very concerned about the really unfavorable development in that case, the precarious situations of young researchers. And I must say I would be happy to give some hopeful statement, but I just don't see it at the moment. Everything I see is that this trend will continue, and this is very disruptive this is a very bad situation, not only for the young people and those who want to become researchers, but also for the higher education, the research system. And the situation at the moment is that for young people who strive for an academic career, it is extremely difficult to get a permanent position, and this is, of course, this reflects the situation in many other fields of the work life, that regular jobs are disappearing, and precarious jobs are becoming more and more so. But I think that is, and unfortunately I don't have a solution. Well, of course, one could always say we need more money. This is an easy sentence to say. We need more money, then we can have more permanent positions. But probably there will be a need for other solutions, how to create working conditions for young researchers that make this academic work attractive again.
All right, thank you. So it kind of raises the question: who is going to bring us there? If the young research staff is maybe at one point not being attracted enough to the field anymore. Gelpast, your prediction, and maybe also as a rector you could also partly respond to the issue that Hans-Peter was just raising.
So I don't see that research is in a relevant amount interdisciplinary, neither in Austria nor in Europe nor in Asia, which is driving research. It is very much disciplinary. What is published, what is taught. I only see the opportunity if very soon the universities will dramatically change, which doesn't mean that this is a discussion I'm very much used to. If you don't have expertise, at least in one discipline, very deep-going expertise. You cannot work interdisciplinary. I don't believe this is true. We have to find a totally new approach, a totally new definition of what is working on a cross-disciplinary way, which is serving the needs of our societies, which is one of the first paragraphs of our University Act. We have to define a new way of academics, which does not mean that the existing definition is, has to be abandoned. And as I said at the beginning, we still need in the future high expertise in small disciplines, in very deep-going disciplinary expertise. But we have much more than need in terms of researchers and in terms of students to broaden up the field. And the combination of so-called mass university and monodisciplinarity is fatal. This combination will run the system directly against a wall. And if we don't change very soon, private institutions like Google, like Apple, like Tesla, and others who are coming up, Singularity University, which is a special topic, they will occupy the field of academics, and the result will be that in 30 years the traditional universities will be irrelevant, totally irrelevant in terms of having an impact in societal development, with all the consequences. So we have to change, and we still need disciplinary expertise on a very small scale in terms of numbers, and we need on the large scale an academization of our society on a very broad scale. And this has not to do anything with, as you said, this is just talk. This is not just talk. To combine expertise, to find new unseen ways what you could and how you could use in totally new combinations the existing knowledge, the existing data. This is the important thing. We have every 12 seconds now, every 12 seconds, a peer-reviewed scientific article is published. We have a huge number of scientific knowledge. And the future is not primarily about making more and more of the same. The demand and the challenge is making different things. And also the Austrian discussion about universities and higher education system is, we want more money for the same. We want more money for less students and doing primarily the same things we did the last decades. This will run the system against the wall. We have to change, and we have to meet the future. And the future, Bill, you're right, is right here.
All right, thank you. Now, before we get to Bill, Eve, because what I heard from the rector also was there's another group, it's the students, and there's also some hope that we can lay in the students. If I paraphrase what I heard, so what is your prediction about the future?
Okay, so I'm not sure it's a prediction or more an aspiration. I have no idea whether we will. I suppose I would want to see universities become learning communities where people are learning together, and I suppose a reaction against not an elite, but a group of people that are bringing a range of expertise that is a reality of the world that we face, and that world that we face is multifaceted and complex, and that we bring all of those experiences in to learn and develop together. So ultimately what I would want to see is much more diverse university communities, and universities where those diversities are part of the strength and part of what makes us human, so part of how we start to tackle and not contribute to a world of work or whether or not we're a successful institution, but actually start to create change agents that will go out and make not just their workplaces successful, but the societies in which they live successful. And for me, I think that needs to be the way that we move forward, and that if that world of work is changing, well, let it change. But the world that we live in and the people that we live with and the challenges we face are more than that work world. They're about how we live and how we live our lives, and that needs to be part of what we develop.
All right, thank you. Now, Bill, the last prediction belongs to you, but you were predicting future that's already here. So, what are you going to propose are the next stages?
I don't think I'm going to concern myself with predictions. I want to talk about most of us who are studying here today are here for a purpose. Much of the purpose in our lives for the last few hundred years, for many years before that, but in academic periods, has been in behalf of a way of earning a living. We believe that we go to a university today, most of us, because we think we have the opportunity to live a better life, and usually that translates into a way of earning one's living. Which means that we are early on molded from the time that we're 2-3 years old, molded with the ideas that the parents work. They see the man go to work. They see the wife go to work. We become a work-oriented society. A particular kind of work. It's what we call a job. It's a way of earning one's living. Now I'm asking you to consider, when that is no longer the prime reason for an education, have we not the opportunity then to take the young ones, 2-3 years old, and develop an education system which is based on a talent, on the native talents that we as humans naturally bring into our life? It's something to think about. A Nobel laureate named James Heckman at Columbia has written extensively. His feeling is that there are many more individuals who exhibit the qualities of genius than we actually find in our daily existence, because too early on we take people and create a mold for them that is based on a working society. Now, there's lots of work to be done. I said that before, but it doesn't have to be structured in behalf of the industrial work. If industry doesn't need us, that doesn't mean there's no work to be done in industry. But to the extent that we are being supplemented or displaced, let us find an education system which may be interdisciplinary, but built around more the native talents of early, what we call early education, 3, 4, 5-year-olds. That's one point I want to make. We've got to do a better job. Pardon me, that's an awful word. what a failure. We've got to do better work at trying to raise our young in a new era. The second point I want to make, which is very important, the number of people in Austria, in Europe, and in the United States that are engaged in voluntary work is increasing faster than the number of workers that are employed by industry. In the United States last year, 60 million Americans reported that they did at least 20 hours of voluntary work. And every survey that is made about satisfaction in work shows that voluntary work reports much higher levels of satisfaction from the work that is being performed. Because you have a choice. You pick what you'd like to do. Want to work with children, want to work with adults, you want to work in the climate, you want to do something. All right. So the question that we really have to address is not, is there enough work? The question is, how do we distribute the wealth that's being created in the 21st century so that we can continue to live a decent life based on wholly new standards, not on the standard of GDP per capita, but based on what it is to live a good life. Now we have the United Nations that has an index which looks at satisfactions, a number of indices. We're going to have to figure out what is a good life and take advantage of these new technologies to enhance our life. Maybe we have more leisure time. What's wrong with leisure time? We hate to talk about leisure time because we think that means getting paid for something that we are not doing. We've got to get over that. The Protestant Revolution is behind us. We approach an era where we really have to figure out what is life satisfaction. What's wrong with thinking about that? I don't know if that's what you will do in interdisciplinary course, but learning how to live a life in an era when the demands, traditional demands, are no longer, I have to have a job and go someplace from 8 in the morning till 6 at night.
It's about meaning, and it's about new way of human condition.
Yeah.
Conditio humana.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Actually, that's a great note to end on, because it's actually leaving you all with a question that you can take home with yourself. Yeah, Bill was raising all those questions, what it means to be human, but what is the meaning that we're going to create for ourselves, and what is the meaning of the future life? I apologize to everyone here who was raising a yellow sheet in the last round, because I was kind of cheating you about your questions. But I thank all of you for your patience for listening to the panel discussion this evening. And please join me in thanking all the panelists for their very free and open statements and discussion this evening. Thank you so much, and thank you all.
And I also want to thank Oliver for making us part of a social experiment. We love social experiments and experiments in general at Angewandte. I never was part of an endeavor where I voted interactively to not be interactive and to not ask any questions. But you are invited heartfully to join us above with a glass of wine or juice, and perhaps continue the discussion, and also grab a speaker and ask perhaps a question directly. Thank you for coming.